we have been given the scientific knowledge, the technical ability, and the materials to pursue the exploration of the universe. To ignore these great resources would be a corruption of a God-given ability.
Hello, this is Harold Clayton, and this is my life story. My first job, I worked at a large bakery in Cleveland, which name was Lob's Bakery. I was there and I ran the day shift wrapping of all the bread. And I'm telling you, it's a lot. I had about 7 different lines, different bread. So I had all these machines. I have a feeder and a catcher. And my job is keep them all running to keep the crew straight. Each machine you had to watch because if you lose a blade, you're going to have the double slice. I'm sure as a kid you remember getting the double slices. That's because the machine lost a blade. It's like a big band blade. And so the big thing I still remember, the time when it was the hardest getting the job done, is when they had a moisture problem and it caused the bread to raise so big, it was hard getting it through the machines. But I did that from the time I got out of service, and my number was coming up, and I had either join the Air Force, which I didn't want to be police force or something like that. And I loved technical and mechanical work. So I joined the Air Force before my number came up, and I spent 4 years in the Air Force. Most of the time was spent at Connell Air Force Base, which I don't think exists anymore, but it was brand new when I went there from my training, and worked on the T-33s there. T-33 is like a F-80 except it's 2-seater. It's a trainer. It's a young pilot and a trainer getting his time and touch-and-goes and everything. And from there, I just went across the field, Boeing, and I worked on the B-47s. And so it worked out. And then I checked in with the NAC facility there. Langley is one facility. Lewis, that was Cleveland. That's when I was at. So I was there when we became NASA. And when we became NASA, my first big job there was I had the AJ-2 research vehicle for flying zero gravity.
The Flight Operations Branch of Lewis Research Center is currently engaged in a program of subgravity and zero-gravity research, using a modified airplane as a research facility. The airplane is a former Navy high-altitude attack bomber, powered by 2 reciprocating engines, each developing 2,300 horsepower. The use to which an aircraft flight test facility can be put in this space age is limited only by man's ingenuity.
Sometimes we go out 3 times a day, and we was out over Lake Erie, and they would take and watch us on radar. We go out and do our maneuvers, get the information, take it back, and they seen the results. And as many times we need to go out for each one of them, we did. Well, you don't want to go out if you're doing zero gravity like that. If you're a really upset stomach. But I never had any problem. The program was coming to an end, okay? And I see no chance of advancement there. So I decided to put in for a transfer, and I transferred to the Cape.
This is the Mercury spacecraft, designed to sustain a man in orbit and return him safely to Earth.
At that time, the last part of the Mercury had just ended, and we had the new Gemini program starting. Another guy and I were pulled over from quality supervision into test director jobs. And we both checked it. From that day on, we both checked every vehicle out, and also the mods on the shuttles. When I came out to California on the Apollo, I had multiple duties. I ended up being the main guy coordinating with all the manufacturing part. So we handled all the tests. Each test required pre-tests. You had meetings to make sure the constraints are all satisfied, and we're not going to jump into a test and create problems because it's wasn't ready. And we signed off on everything. On station, power on the vehicle, we were there. Around the clock. I worked a lot of 12-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week. When we was going to the moon, yeah. But I always enjoyed my work. I never mind getting up. The job is interesting. That's why I always try to tell anybody. My main advice is you decide what you want to do. Don't go to school thinking you want to do something and spend all your time, 4 years, and all your money. Then when you come back out, you're going to go out and get a job that you could have went and trained for in the beginning. Back in Jimmy Carter's day, they had a deal for suggestions, improvements, which they have an office at the center. If it's significant enough, they sent you an award, and this is from Jimmy Carter. Well, it was an award I turned in. I turned in an improvement for the government to save money. I got several of those. And this one right here, it'll be interesting to you. This is a letter from the director of Langley Field. It was really interesting. We had 2 vehicles. They had to be launched within about a 30-day window. If you recall, they both made it. They both performed. That's the original landing on Mars.
The 11-month, 420-million-mile trip for the 2 Viking orbiter landers was set in motion by 2 launches. One in August, one in September. Earth shrinks smaller and smaller as the 2 Vikings head toward their Martian rendezvous. Then, braking rockets fire on command, slowing the first Viking explorer enough that it goes into orbit around Mars. For the next 2 weeks, the orbiting spacecraft will survey the surface below, transmitting pictures of possible landing sites to scientists on Earth. The Martian surface should be a study in contrasts. From vast, dust-swept plains to immense canyons and frost-covered plateaus, huge gullies and channels photographed by earlier Mariner spacecraft are believed to have been caused by running water sometime in the distant past.
This is Armstrong and Aldrin. This guy here, Michael Collins, stayed in the Apollo. When they dropped down, and he mucked up and met with them and brought them back home. And there's a moon buggy. This is some of the guys in my office. This here was for the extended mission. This is mounted into the payload bay. But I covered almost all of that there. They just wanted to show, for show and tell, I guess. Here's the tail cone. If you had to put that tail cone to ferry it, okay, because the drag would be, and that's the tail cone that we only had one, but they figured, well, if we lost that tail cone, we could get a vehicle from Edwards or someplace else back to the Cape. But that's how we ferried them back, shuttle on top to 747. Believe it or not, the guy that's ahead of this, he was the pilot I worked with in Cleveland. And he's a cool guy. He's always, somebody at my eye to live as him because he was a neat guy. And he could fly anything, and it's pretty good. His name is Joe Algrani. I don't know if he's still living or not.
Are you ready to see what Kim's been working on in the office?
Yeah, I am. I allowed in here. Oh my goodness. That's great. That's really good. That's a big one there. That's when I went back to KSC for return to flight after the accident with the team. We worked round the clock to sign off on everything for the center. That's the first Snoopy Award there. That certificate was the big one I was telling you about. That's my last big award before I retired. That's when we went down for a return to flight. This is when I retired, the astronaut award. This is my AJ2. That's me right there. That's me right there. These two are pilots, and these two was engineering, doing their experiment. Here's the Gemini. If you look at it, it's got a lot of names, but if you look on there, there's an astronaut, Edward White. He's the one I was telling you we lost at far. I think there's some astronauts on here, a lot of the people. That's when I was going to TDY, both places up there. Well, that eagle was for a major design change. That was for a major design change. Instead of me fly it down, there's a guy, he's the head of the awards office. He came out and presented it to me at the office. Well, I always enjoyed my work, and that's what made a big difference. It's always a challenge. You get to work with so many different people, interface with so many.